Now, let me show you what my settings were in After Effects. If you double click in this little panel here, or right click, however you want to do it, I double click, and you go and find the images that you are working on. I renamed them in order, make sure they're in order. And if you click the first one and you just press options here, you want to make sure that it's importing as a JPEG sequence. And it's going to make a file like this one here. So there's this little trick that, you know, most young filmmakers like to do, is to mimic anamorphic film styles. So the anamorphic ratio is 2.35.1, I believe. Basically, that means your width is going to be much larger than your height, which will give this more cinematic look at the end of your product. Keep in mind, you just want to play your stuff back at quarter speed. It's not worth trying to play it back at full render. Maybe check it here and there, but save some time. And that's what I learned in all this, saving time, but keeping quality high. Once you have that sequence, you can drop it into your timeline. So normally when you pop it in here, it's not going to be scaled. It's going to be scaled at 100%. This is the benefit of shooting at 6K, because when you bring it into your post, you have the ability to downsize it, still retain the quality, and recompose your image. If you play through it the first time, you want to probably put on, if we go over to effects, and then warp stabilizer. This is just something that I learned from the first hyperlapse time lapse that I did. It does help smooth out whatever camera shakes there is. Another thing that's going to help the quality of your time lapse is frame blending. What that means is After Effects is going to try to fill in the gaps between each frame to give a much smoother transition and less of a jittery, photogenic look. It's going to make it more of a cinematic film look. So if you navigate your mouse over to this little icon, this will enable blending of your frames. So if you click that and then navigate all the way to this section on your image sequence, and you click it, now it's going to analyze it, and then you have to kind of run it through again. Okay, the rendering's finished. Let's look and see what it looks like. I for a rule of thumb, I will always put the frame blending on just to have that special quality, you know, that special movement. So that's really what I did here in After Effects. I made sure my composition was where I wanted it, based on where the image is and where I placed the image and how I scaled it. 2, I made sure that there weren't any jittery motions, there weren't any camera shaking up and down, so I made sure that was compensated with the warp stabilizer function. I made sure that the image blending was on, so I could have a much smoother transition with the video playing back. So those are the 3 things I did, and I made sure in After Effects before I moved on to Premiere. Now, here's another thing I learned. This creates a very, very large file, as you can imagine, right? So having just these 5, 6 time lapses create a very massive file. And I tried to use the dynamic linking feature that the Adobe system has. And so dynamic linking, if you don't know what it is, you can bring in, for instance, if we're in Premiere, you can bring in an After Effects file without exporting it directly to Premiere, and then you can edit simultaneously. So if there's an edit that you need to make in After Effects, as long as you have that file and that timeline, you can go back to After Effects, edit it, and it'll automatically update to that timeline. Now here's the thing with that. It slows your workflow down tremendously, especially with higher res images and bigger files, because it has to re-render that. And so that slowed my workflow down like crazy, and I was getting so frustrated. And so to my mind, I was like, okay, I always have to retain quality. So I'm thinking, like, if I export, it's going to make no sense. but it makes a lot of sense. So what I did, I exported the After Effects file and dropped it into Premiere. And that saved me tons of time, because now it's treating it as just a movie file rather than it being a dynamic linked After Effects file, because that definitely slows it, especially if you don't have the power. I only have 32 gigs of RAM in this iMac, and it ate it up every time, and so it barely moved. So yeah, keep that in mind.